gonna drive in, and we're
Okay.
gonna put it in a secure area, so if anything happens, it's gonna be in a safe spot.
Hold on.
Oh, hold on.
Okay, they're going.
Masks are awesome. All right, I now call this, good afternoon and welcome to the May 21st, 2020 special board meeting of the Roswell Independent School District. I now call this meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please? Ms. Whitcamp?
Alan Getty,
Yes.
Hope Morales,
Yes.
Hilda Sanchez,
Hilda, are you there? It says she's still on here. Hilda Sanchez? Miss Sanchez?
Come back.
Mona Kirk,
Mona?
James Edwards,
Yes.
We got three. We're good.
Hilda Sanchez, Mona Kirk,
Hold on, I'm trying to call him. If you call Hilda, I'll come on in.
Okay, I'm trying to work on it through Skype, but it's not letting me, so.
So I have,
We got,
I have you on my, I have you on speaker on my cell phone,
That's fine.
Ms.
That's
Kirk.
fine.
So, your name has been called for roll call,
Okay.
yes or no?
You have reached the voicemail. Yes.
okay, I guess you go on. Okay.
we talked to Hilda earlier, so we know.
Yeah. Okay, well, are there any modifications to the agenda?
Mr. President, members of the board, there are no modifications to the agenda.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Mr.
I
Kirk.
second.
Okay, hi Hilda. I have a motion made by Ms. Kirk
Aye.
and a second made by Ms. Sanchez. Roll call.
Alan Getty,
Yes.
Hope Morales,
Yes.
Hilda Sanchez,
Yes.
Mona Kirk,
Yes.
James Edwards.
Yes.
Got
All
it.
right, the ayes have it, the motion is carried. We now have consent agenda.
Mr. President, members of the board, I recommend approval of the consent agenda to approve the April 2020 bills and the approval of 1 May 2020 bar.
Is there any discussion? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved.
I have a motion made by Mr. Edwards, second made by Ms. Sanchez. Roll call,
That's
please.
correct.
Alan Getty,
Yes.
Hope Morales,
Yes.
Hilda Sanchez,
Yes.
Mona Kirk,
Yes.
James Edwards.
Yes.
Okay, next, we have action items. We have an RFP recommendation for auditor services.
Mr. President, members of the board, I recommend approval of the RFP, recommended audit services. Mr. Cole is here for any questions.
Is that the same audit company that we've used in the past?
Yes, sir, it is. This is Chad.
Okay, so it's the same one that we dealt with last year, right?
It is, yes. They've done our audit for the past 3 years, yes, sir.
Okay, okay.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Cole, are
Yes, ma'am.
there any, anything outstanding that we need to be apprised of in this audit, RFP?
Thank you, Ms. Kirk. No, not that I'm aware of. We did the standard RFP process. Of course, we convened our committee that consisted of several people from the business office and, of course, our chief procurement officer. In reviewing those firms, we really appreciate the firms that participated. They were all very good firms in our analysis. But in particular, the firm that we are recommending really stood head and shoulders above the rest in terms of what they could bring to the table and in terms of their resources, their regional ability to review audits. They had very clean peer reviews from other CPA firms, and just really their staffing complement and their ability to help us through the audit process and produce a high-quality product is what we were looking at, and that's what the recommendation's based on.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other discussion?
Yep.
If not, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
We got a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Kirk, Mr. Edwards, second made by Ms. Kirk. Roll call, please.
Ellen Getty,
Yes?
Hope Morales,
Yes.
Hilda Sanchez, Mona Kirk,
Yes.
James Edwards.
Yes.
Hilda, are you there?
Okay. All right. Next, we have the Roswell Independent School District 2021 Fixed Operating Budget Authorization.
Mr. President, members of the board, I recommend approval of the Roswell Independent School District 2020-2021 fixed operational budget authorization. I have Mr. Cole here to go over the presentation.
Okay?
Board President Getty, Superintendent Gottlieb, members of the board, thank you so much for having this special meeting for us today to approve both our audit RFP and to review and consider our proposal for next year's 2020-2021 school district operating budget. I understand that these are interesting times that we're living through, and really appreciate you helping us out to get to this point. We feel pretty sound about it, all things considered. So with that, we'll just get started. I'm going to step back a little bit back here because this clicker seems to work better when I'm in close proximity. And I'll stand out of the way. So just kind of a brief overview. And I don't know how fast you want me to go or how slow you want me to go, but I can adjust. So you give me some signals or some cues, and we can speed up if we need to. I know this was sent out to you earlier. I know not everybody got to see it ahead of time. They were having some issues opening some of the files. So with that, we'll just get started here. So school budgets passed. Again, about this time last year, we were talking about our concerns with the changes to the state equalization guarantee. There were major changes made to the SEG formula last year and a lot of consolidation. So we saw what was traditionally a separate fund for instructional materials, a separate fund for K through 5 extended school program. Those were separately funded from the SEG. And last year, they were rolled into the SEG, which of course caused SEG to increase, but also there were some other mandated things from last year, like a 6% increase. That was not an average increase, that was a flat rate increase. And also with the addition of about $10,000 at each tier level increase on the 3-tiered licensure, it really came out to about 13 to 15% recurring cost increase in our recurring cost structure last year. And of course, as we go forward, we're going to look at the trend of the operational fund and its timeline over the last few years, and we're going to see a huge jump in revenue. But what I want you to keep in mind, again, just a reminder, last year we talked about some of the issues with distortion by consolidating those things together and calling it an increase. That's not a knock, it's just, it is what it is. We have to understand that those costs recur from year to year. So we've been structured in at that rate, and that's a pretty amazing rate when we look at the graph here in a minute. So also, school budget's present, where we are right now. House Bill 2 of the 2020 legislative session, which closed up in March and got signed into law, provides the basis of the district's primary operating revenue source, which is state equalization guarantee. Again, that's for the 2020-21 school year. So that's what we're constructing and building this budget on that you have here today in front of you, is House Bill 2 of the 2020 legislative session. And of course, immediately, everything changed. The world changed. COVID-19 changed. The oil and gas market, well, the oil market changed. The gas market has never recovered in New Mexico from 2008 when it was slashed in half on the price per BTU. So the other thing that's in House Bill 2 of 2020, it requires an average 4% increase to budgeted personnel salaries for 2020-2021 school year. And it increases, the legislation increases the revenues to fund that by 3.39%. So again, not quite enough to fully fund. School budget's future, and so we're talking about the immediate future, the very near term, the next couple of months. I think the word has gotten out, and people are starting to hear about it and read about it, if they haven't already. But in terms of a $7.6 billion appropriation through the legislative session this year in March, in looking at the consensus revenue reports from the consensus revenue group and some other reports coming out, it looks like a 26.3% shortfall in the appropriation made for building next year's budget. So that's an issue. School districts are highly funded through that appropriation each year. And so I know they work really hard at the legislature to try and protect school districts in these types of funding cuts. So of course we all appreciate that. But just looking at the raw number, if you take $2 billion divided by $7.6 billion, it's 26.3%. That's the shortfall, according to what we're hearing. And of course, projections for the longer term, the next 2 years, don't look very good either. So we need to continue to monitor that. There will be a special legislative session starting June 18th of 2020. Mr. Gottlieb received word on that today, along with some other additional information regarding K through 5 and extended school year. And of course, our budget is due to New Mexico Public Education Department now in May, actually next week. And of course, the new fiscal year will start July 1, and that's what we're trying to be prepared for. I know a lot of folks, including business managers all over the state, we've been talking about this together and calling each other late in the evenings when we're working on these things. And so, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about is, okay, well, how does this make any sense? Why are we building a budget when we know it's going to go away? It's going to change. It's going to be totally different than what was passed into law this session. And I think the important part to understand is it's part of the timing of the cycle in crossing over into fiscal years, and it's extremely important that we get that budget in place as of July 1. And I think the PED understood that early on, and kudos to them for stepping out there and pushing this thing forward with their virtual spring budget workshop and getting this information out and pressing on the gas in terms of not letting up on the deadlines. They've been very flexible, I will tell you. They've been very flexible with our district and many others in terms of submitting things according to their deadlines. But they are upholding those deadlines, and I think that's a wise choice to keep everybody incentivized and moving forward quickly. as we know that the special session is coming on the 18th. And so, again, our goal is to establish that budget as of July 1 so we can continue to pay our bills, our accounts payable is running, continue our payroll, all of those things. We do have lots of folks that work through the summer that are continuing to work long after graduation, so there's still lots to do and things that we need to achieve. Of course, budgets are planning tools, and they are subject to change. They change every year. We know the process. We bring it to the board every month. It's called a BAR, Budget Adjustment Request. And so it's very easy for us to come back to you and present changes to the budget as we move forward and as they occur. And so the impact, we talked about this a little bit the other day at our committee meeting. The unit value increases 3.39%. Again, we talked about the revenue increase on the appropriation side. Goes to $4,758.10. So in terms of the district, currently this year we're at $91.1 million in SEG. Next year we're projecting to be at $94.1 million. Now, do we think that's realistic given all the concerns? Probably not, but that's okay. Like I said, we'll budget accordingly and make adjustments accordingly as we go. And of course, we'll keep you and the community informed as to what's going on because we know how important that is. We understand it from our side. We want the answers right now as well. And a lot of people are asking us questions and we don't know the answers to them immediately. But we're working really hard to get those answers for you and for the community. Again, we talked about this came out, I believe, late yesterday afternoon, maybe a little earlier. The PED recognizes that we're not going to be able to pull off extended learning time in the same manner as it was written into law. And I think that's wise to have us focus on our core competencies and also in adjusting to a virtual learning environment going forward and focusing on student and staff safety. So we're well aware of those things and we're talking about those things every day. So just to give you some background information, the historical trend of final state unit value, we've talked about these things before. Essentially, we get an initial unit value and a final unit value each year. The final unit value typically comes right around the third quarter of the year by the time you've already spent most of your funds and you're graduating kiddos. So when you get a cut in the final unit value in the third quarter of the year, it makes it very, very difficult to absorb that cut because you've essentially spent to your budget plan, which was built on something that was greater than the cut. So that's where that cash, that's one area where cash balance comes into play. We think it's so critical, so important, and I would just point that out to your attention. And of course, you've got the data there for it as well. Also, a big driver is we know that the state unit value drives the whole thing, but essentially in the formula, the other side of that equation is the district's student membership. And in building an initial budget for a new fiscal year, we always take the average of the 80th and 120th days of school and the attendance counts on those days. Now you can see the trend over the years. We're pretty steady Eddie in terms of what goes on. I mean, there's definitely some bell curve action going on there on a repeating cycle. But overall, it's not a huge up or down increase. I mean, you're looking at probably within 1 to 2% year over year increase or decrease. So we've seen that, and that's one of the beautiful things about Roswell. In terms of oil and gas communities here in the southeast corner of the state, we don't experience the same vacuum or influx when it comes to that industry, and so it becomes much better in terms of managing students coming in and leaving and the funds that those students generate and the impacts that has. So I'll just point that out to you. So here's SEG over the last, I think, 13 years. Going back to 08, 09. That was when the last financial collapse hit. You can see that dip in the blue line. That's the revenue cliff that they talked about back during that time period. That red line represents both regular state SEG and federal stimulus dollars combined, and you can see that it just kind of acted up like a bridge. It bought us time. It bought us two or 3 years to restructure ourselves at the district level, at the state level, bring some of our costs down, and not have to make major cuts and things of that nature. So I know there were a lot of concerns at that moment in time about stimulus funds, but in truth and reality, it just bought us time to restructure. And you can see how long it took to recover as a state and as a district in terms of the revenue flows. I mean, we really didn't get back to where we were until, was that 13, 14, I think? I'm a little far out here. Yeah, 13, 14. And then, of course, in 14, 15, we started to rise back up. And 15, 16, we're flat. And then all of a sudden in 16, 17, we had another oil issue at that time. And it was, again, the price of oil, price per barrel of oil, kind of driving those rig counts and the profitability of the industry here in New Mexico. So you can see we started to come back up the following year. And then when we got to this year, I'm calling it last year because I'm already thinking of next year, but when we got to 1920, that is when the revenue really spiked through the SEG. Now again, there's several reasons for that. One, there was a legitimate increase to the SEG. There was also the combining of K through 5 and instructional materials, which used to be separately funded, pushed into that particular fund, combining it together. So again, that distorts it a little bit, but again, it is what it is, and it jumped up significantly. And of course, we built off of that as a state with this past legislative session with another 3.39% increase to those revenues. And again, we feel pretty certain that a lot of those things are going to have to go away. Now, there's some nice mechanisms built into this new formula, pardon me, that will help us in terms of, we just talked about K through 5 and extended school year. So if we're looking at this graph, and we know that prior to 19 and 20, in 18 and 19, that's really kind of where this trend line shows that we were at. So if we're returning that direction in terms of our revenues, which I think we might be, if you take a 26% cut, that's kind of right where it puts you, right at that same level as the 18-19 school year, then that tells you some things. So at any rate, I'll leave it at that. Current year, 2019-2020 combined estimated operational revenue by source. My apologies, at the very bottom of this chart it says 15-16. That's a template. I update it every year. I obviously forgot to update the 15-16. We're talking about the 2019-2020 on the header part of this. And so that's the operational revenue for the current year that we're in right now, 19-20, just to give you a comparative as we move into projected. The district's cost structure, I won't walk through each one. You've got a copy, and you can certainly see the 79.44% current year estimated operational expenditures of salaries and benefits. That's the big one. That's the telling one. Typically, that would be anywhere from 85 to 90% in a given year. Again, by the influx of those revenues, that large $18 million, almost $19 million influx for 19 and 20, again, distorts that a little bit in terms of what we're used to seeing. So again, we're at 79.44%. You can see our estimated operational expenditures, again, by account function and by account object code, salaries, benefits, professional services, plant services, other services, supply, and capital outlay. And you can see the percentages both on the side and at the bottom in terms of what we have done this year. And I've kind of walked through and gave you just a brief narrative on each one of our revenue line items and why we do or do not budget some things. Of course, as revenues flow into those line item accounts, we'll adjust budget as we go. That's common practice. But there are a lot of items that are not necessarily recurring items, and we don't know if they're going to show up. Insurance recoveries is a great example. I mean, maybe one year you have a portable catch fire or something like that, and the next year you don't experience that kind of thing. So it's really hard to try and come up with a projection on something like that. And so in many cases we don't. We just say it's zero and we adjust as the revenue comes in. Interest income, we feel like that's probably going to go down, not significantly, but a little bit this year. We know that the Fed has dropped rates, and that has a lot to do with the interest rates you get at the bank. Facilities, rental, summer fees. Now, summer fees is interesting, especially when we went to this extended learning time and the summer extended school year programs. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to charge students and their families for something that was already being funded through the state. So we did not collect those fees this last summer, and we were not intending to collect them this summer before all the COVID-19 happened. Again, insurance recoveries are unpredictable. Charter administrative fee is very predictable. It's always 2% of their SEG. The contract revenue, there's a issue here. I should have said it's not going to remain at the same contracted levels. We've actually talked to the charter school. They're expanding quite a bit, significantly. They're receiving additional revenues, and they know that that's going to be a little bit more work for us in the services that we provide them. So that will double this year, or this coming year. Federal Forest Reserve, again, some years you get it, some years, several years you go without it. So no good way to know. Typically it comes in about April or May of each year. Indirect costs, they follow their federal grant counterparts. The rate for next year is 4.4%. That's the administrative costs of administering those grants and the reimbursement process. The sale of district property, again, we have an auction typically every other year. We were planning for an auction this year. I don't think we're going to be able to pull it off with everything else that's going on right now. So we'll look at next year for an auction. And again, it doesn't generate a whole lot of money, but it's more of just a clean process type thing. E-rate, Mr. Braggs is in the room with us, and he works really hard on that application every year, and we've seen some really good revenues come in and been able to equip our communications as a district through that. So kudos to him. He's been doing a really good job on that for several years now. If we look at the revenue over several years, you can tell. He's done a great job. So next year is 2020, 2021 combined projected operational revenue by source. Again, there at the bottom where it says 15, 16, if you'll just disregard that, that's my template. I need to update it or clear that out completely, actually. But what we're talking about is 2020, 2021 combined projected operational revenue, just like we looked at for the current year. And so you can kind of scroll down and see, we talked about SCG being $94.1 million. You can see ad valorem tax levies at $389,000. You can see oil and gas, we're not projecting anything. Neither is the state, and they get it from the county. So that's a zero for now, and we'll see where that goes, but I think that's a longer term issue. Bank interest, we're slightly down below what you saw in the current year. Again, we think that interest rate is going to continue to go down a little bit, but not significant with the cash balances that run through the bank. Administrative charter fee has gone up significantly. Typically, that's right around 14,000 each year. It goes up to 36,000. You can see, again, that's 2% of their SEG, so that's telling. It tells us they're expanding. Non-recurring revenue, again, we talked about the kind of the logic as to why we do or do not budget those items. And you can just see there. I think on E-rate we got around 300,000 this year. I always budget conservatively because I never want to be over budgeted. You never want to get halfway through the year or at worse at year end and say, oh, I should have adjusted that down. So that may be a little conservative on the E-rate for next year. And insurance recoveries, again, that's pretty conservative considering some of the things we've seen the last couple of years with windstorms, roofs, and various issues with weather. Our unrestricted cash is down significantly. Again, in the current year, early on in the current year, we'd had discussions about dipping into the cash balance, even with revenue spiking this year. And so we planned for that, we executed that, and that's where we're at. Is there a question?
No, it's just,
Oh, okay.
sound.
And so here's our cost structure for 2020-21. Now we can see the impact of those salary increases, the 4%. We jumped from 79% to 93% of salaries. I'll just tell you, I always like to be in that range, but given the revenue spike from this year, it kind of changes everything, or maybe distorts not the right word. It changes the way we view it because of the influx of those revenues. So, but again, we know those are going to start to peel back going forward. And you can see that we've done some trimming. We're battening down the hatches, doing risk mitigation, and thinking about other things that we might need to do. Of course, our top priority is our staff and maintaining our staff. We've worked really hard to bring in highly qualified staff, and we want to keep them. So you can see the operational budget expenditures for 2020-21. And again, we're at the 98 million there. You can see the largest block goes to direct instruction, 67%. Student support at 9%. Instructional support at another 1%. So 77% thereabouts. Anybody have any questions on this one? This is essentially taking thousands and thousands of line item accounts, and I sent you those as well. If you want to read through the whole thing, have fun. It's a lot of accounts to look at. But this breaks it down much simpler, and it just kind of consolidates all of those account strings into a nice budget matrix that you can look at it at a glance and see what's going on very easily in terms of both the percentages and the dollar amounts by function and by object code.
Chad, one quick thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Later, could you send us the definitions for the items under the description so that I have a better understanding when I look at instruction, like some of the things that might fall under that line item for instruction compared to the other items?
I can. It's going to be very basic, Hope, or Ms. Morales. It's going to be very basic. It'll maybe be a one-liner. What I would do is pull it from our chart of accounts. And basically what it's going to say for function one, and I'm happy to do it. I'll do that, yes.
No, I just want to understand the difference. Some of them seem a little similar in language, so I just want to understand the difference.
Yeah. So it's going to talk about, like, with function 1000, it's going to say direct instruction. And it might give a couple of examples like teacher, regular teacher salaries and benefits cost for direct instruction. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll send you the chart of accounts. Will that work?
Okay, thanks.
because that'll have everything. That's kind of our Bible in terms of the chart of accounts that we use as a state. So I'm happy to send that.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions on this particular slide? This is the budget, just consolidated in a matrix. Okay. And so we had a lot of insurance questions. And so fortunately, Mr. Edwards and Ms. Morales helped me visualize this a little bit better, and I hope it's kind of what you guys were looking for in terms of the dollar amounts. We spread it across the entire split between the district and the employee, and you can see what the wage rates are, what the increase actually is for each option of the plan, the high option and the low option. We know that the low option is going to increase 2.1%. The high option is going to increase 8.7%. In talking to NIPSIA folks, they've really worked to help the districts out over the last 5 years. They've dipped into their cash balance to the extent where they can no longer do that to save us in some off years, particularly 16 and 17, from having to increase those costs during those down years. So they are going to increase this year, and their costs have gone up. So it is what it is, but you can see the dollar amounts that will increase, and those are annual dollar increases. And then I just broke down what a 4% on various folks would look like in terms of its total increase to the pay. And of course, we can apply whatever we want to, a level 3 teacher at $60,000, we can apply 1%, 2%, 3% very easily and see what that looks like. But I think the main thing that you wanted to see there was what's the actual dollar increase to the employee for the insurance costs. Any questions on that one?
Just, I guess, one question
Yes, sir.
from me, Mr. Cole, is.
Yes, sir.
Is, if we get to the point where we know that 4% goes away,
Yes, sir.
can we, I guess I would just want to make sure that we're sort of offsetting that cost a little bit.
I think that's.
It's not that much when you, in the overall scheme of things, it's a lot for 1,000, but I don't know if it's worth making that just.
I think it's a great point. We had talked about that before, Mr. Gottlieb and I, and of course, Hope or Ms. Morales and Mr. Edwards had talked about that as well at our last meeting, and wanted to see some more details there. I think everybody's heart and mind is in the right place. We don't want to penalize our staff for cost increases, particularly right now, and so we'll certainly look at that. It'll be on my mind as we go forward. The big question mark in my mind, everybody's mind, how much is the cut?
Yep.
What does that really, is it as scary as we think it could be, might be, or, there's a lot of ways that they can shift things around, dip into certain reserves, dip into CARES Act funds, offset a lot of these things for like a year, and it maybe isn't quite so bad. And by peeling back the K through 5 expense and the extended learning time expense, but also pulling back the revenues out of there, that may be manageable. That may be. But I think we should wait and see what it is. Yeah. And fortunately, we've been working with our union groups, and they've been fantastic. They understand what's going on. They're reading up on and keeping in the loop of what's going on. So we really appreciate them as well.
Mr. Cole, I just wanted to tell you thank you for breaking it down with the actual dollar amounts. I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
it's very helpful for most people to kind of understand and to look and to do some quick math.
Yes.
So I thank you for understanding our goal, to make sure teachers are not taking home less pay. And again, this is just going to be so much of a tool to help us in those conversations as we continue to have them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of why we have these meetings, and it's so I can get the perspective of everybody else, because I don't always look at things the same. I'm looking at this from the district's perspective typically, and I'm saying to myself, okay, this is a cost increase to the district, not necessarily to the employee, even though I'm an employee and it affects me the same way. But yeah, it's good to get the additional perspectives, and I you know, in putting this together, I thought, let's just get as much information in there as possible. So I'm glad it helps, and thank you for the suggestion. Okay, and so I've been following the PED's website and monitoring it for award letters. You know, that's kind of the game. It's kind of like a scavenger hunt this time of year. You know, they sneak some things in. We go out and look and find them and start building budgets off of those. So these are awards and things that we can calculate for budget and have calculated for budget. That's in your packet of those line item account budgets that we're submitting to the PED through their operating budget management system, otherwise known as the OBMS. And so you can see a lot of federal awards there, food services, the old instructional materials fund that went away. We got to carry over that cash that was there, so that's great. That helps us. Now it's going away, but not until we expend it down, and we've got some major needs and major plans to get with that. So we're on it. You can see pupil transportation, food services, Title I, migrant education, IDEA B, entitlement and preschool, so on and so forth there, for a total of another $52 million, $52.7 million. Our debt service fund is well funded. I just want to point that out. And of course, we've been rapidly paying off debt for the last 10 years. So we are doing good in that realm. You know, I'm a believer in not taking on additional debt burdens during times like these, but I sure believe in paying them off fast. Local 2 mil, that's exciting. 4.7 million, we're going to need it. We're going to need to buy computers. Conclusions. You know, there's nothing that we haven't really talked about or that you don't already know here in terms of the conclusions. It's not looking good economically, but we've seen that before, and we've gotten through it before, and we'll do it again. So I'll stand for any questions.
All right, I'll just say thank you to Mr. Edwards and Ms. Morales and you and your team. This is thorough. It's good stuff. Wish we had, wish we didn't have to have a budget conversation where we said, and by the way, in about 30 days, we're going to have different news. But that's where we are. So thank you for doing this and being thorough. Thank you, Mr. Edwards and Ms. Morales, for all your help. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you all for not shooting the messenger.
Am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'd like to ask Mr. Cole a couple of questions.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right. One, I know that the economic downturn is what drives budgets. But the other question I have, the other comment I want to make is, are we right now, are we pretty solvent?
Well, yes. The answer is yes, as of right now, but the problem is that can change overnight.
Okay.
Yeah. But
But
yes,
our current
we're in
status
great
is we're
shape.
solvent.
Yes, sir. Yes, we are.
Did you have another question, Mr. Edwards?
The next one is, you won't know anything until after the June meeting, correct?
Well, yes, I think that's correct, yes. We don't know,
Okay.
yeah, that's true.
That's
Yeah,
it, pretty much.
Up to this point, it's speculation, but,
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear, speculation.
sure. But I'll tell you, when you're the guy that's on the line for this stuff, you want to look out ahead of the curve. You got to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly, and that's, it's better to be proactive than to be reactive.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And for that, I thank you, Mr. Cole, and I know that Mr. Gottlieb is very conservative also. So I appreciate everything both of y'all are doing. Great presentation. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, any other comments or discussion?
Mr. President, can I ask one question?
Absolutely, Ms. Sanchez.
I just want to know, do we already know what programs will not be fully funded due to the budget cuts? Or not yet?
Do we, let me make sure I have the question correct. Do we have any programs that we
What
know
program
won't be fully funded?
will not be? That's correct.
We do.
Like I
We've
know
got.
Mr. Goss mentioned the career ladder. That money is not going to be, that's not going to be longer, this year?
The
We're not gonna
career
have the
ladder?
Career ladder? Yes.
I think we're looking at the career ladder very closely, but we're frozen for the current year because we're trying to close up the current year and see where the revenues are going to go. So I think we're looking at that for the future with
No,
Mr.
well,
Gottlieb, of course.
What I have done right now, Ms. Sanchez, members of the board, Mr. President, is I have put the career ladder on hold because I want to make sure we fund our some,
As soon as I get through this meeting, I'll give you a call and I'll talk to the superintendent.
Hey,
One mo-
Mr. Edwards, could you mute yourself so that,
I hear a lot of
it's been frozen for right now until we see what happens in our session come June 18th, 19th, and 20th, if it is a two-day session. So it will give us a picture of what is really going on, how much money the state may asking us to look at and cut. My first obligation is to our staff to ensure that we have everything in place. And if we have our staff in place, then we have everything in place for students, and that's the critical component as we move forward. As you are well aware from from yesterday's announcement from the Secretary of Education, is that the K-5 Plus program and Chad's presentation was put on hold for 2020-2021 school year, and so has ELPT. So the extended school year programs that we had in the elementary during the school year, at nighttime, some of the weekend activities, and then the high school, middle school activity, which is always June 10th through the 19th, all those will not happen next year. So those programs we know are either frozen or already gone for this next school year.
Wow.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that is a big impact on learning and teachers, because it helps everybody out in the long run. But that was no choice by anybody else, but I do know that will be one of the issues that they may help the rest of the school districts statewide as they're looking at where can they save money for this one next year, and what is the savings going to look like. Otherwise, one thing that Mr. Cole did not talk to you about is, knock on wood, they have not looked at sweeping the cash. And that is a critical component. It would be much more difficult if they sweep our cash balances and then trying to figure out how to pay all those federal grants and other grants back when you don't have the money up front to do it, or to provide the extra things that we are going to try to do as we move forward. So an excellent question, Ms. Sanchez. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
any other questions?
Can
Okay,
I ask just another question real quick?
yes.
In your committee for your finance, do you have school employees sitting on this committee?
Could you say that again, Ms. Sanchez? I think you said, do we have central employees on that committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you
Yes.
sit in the finance committee with you guys?
Yes, ma'am. We do. We have parents, we have central office folks, cross-functional experts. We have both union groups represented, principals, teachers, and the newspaper.
Shit, can't leave the newspaper out.
It's, this year's been much more difficult since everything is virtual.
Yes, sir.
In general, you know, we had these committees, meetings where everybody was together, most of the time here in the boardroom, meeting together as a group. Just as the teachers had the challenge this year, as we're having our board meeting, those things are extremely challenging as we work together, but we did have those meetings.
Yeah, and we appreciate the newspaper. I mean, there are years where nobody, bats an eye about budget. It's kind of a yawner type thing, but this is not one of those years. So we really appreciate the newspaper diving in and helping us get this out to the community. We feel like it's important. Again, everybody asks lots of questions, and we don't have all the answers, but we do need to talk through it as a community, I think, and share what we can.
Anything else? All right, with that, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved.
I have a motion made by Ms. Sanchez and a second made by Ms. Kirk. Is that okay, Ms. Kirk?
Yes.
All right. Roll call, please.
Ellen Getty,
Yes.
Hope Morales,
Yes.
Hilda Sanchez,
Yes.
Mona Kirk,
Yes.
James Edwards. Mr. Edwards?
Yeah,
All right. The ayes have it and the motion is carried. This is the end of the agenda.
May I say one thing?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Mr. President, members of the board, remember our graduation is Saturday at the Wool Bowl, our graduation parade, I should call it. We ask you to be there at 8 o'clock. Our Roswell High students will be arriving at 7:30. After visiting with our plan, again, another review this morning, we decided that all board members need to come on College and Grand at 8 o'clock. We must make sure you have your badge with you. And we'll have somebody there, and I'll be there very early to get you through the barricade so we can get you in. We'll have a special place for you to park your cars. Remember sunscreen, a hat, umbrellas if you can, please, and keep the sun off. It was very pleasant this morning, but I can't promise you that on Saturday. So we appreciate your support of our students. I can't tell you, it means a lot that you're being there for them and taking part in this special event. So if you have any problems or any questions, please call me.
Mike, can we pick up our shirts from, Mr. Gottlieb, can we pick up our shirts from you tomorrow?
We will call you as soon as they come in. So if they don't come in earlier, where I can get to you, then I'll take them to the Wool Bowl for Saturday. But they've promised me they're going to get in tomorrow, and we'll immediately call you to come pick them up.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, now do I have a motion to adjourn?
yes.
Okay, I have a motion-
Second.
I have a motion made by Mr. Edwards and a second made by Ms. Kirk. Roll call, please.
Ellen Getty,
Yes.
Hope Morales,
Yes.
Hilda Sanchez,
Yes.
Mona Kirk,
Yes.
James Edwards.
Yes.
All right, time of adjournment is 2:20.